all know a guy who only occasionally shaves for big occasions, and it's because that occasional shave really hurts. It's the time of year for big occasions, and yet there he is, suffering with that cheap drugstore razor. Let's help him out. Henson Shaving's line of razors, built with aerospace precision, deliver a smooth shave your dad, brother, and even son can enjoy, eventually. With replacement blades just 10 cents each, you'll buy it once and they'll use it for life. How's that for the perfect gift? Celebrate with 100 free blades on your first purchase, and no subscription headaches. HensonShaving.com/holiday.
And now, all the way from the other side of the pond, it's the Tea Party Power Hour with Mark Gillar.
Welcome to the Tea Party Power Hour. I am your host, Mark Gillar. I want to remind everybody, if you'd like to subscribe to our newsletter, all you have to do is text the word tea, that's T-E-A, as in taxed enough already, to 44144. Once again, that's T to 44144. Also want to remind you that Christmas is coming up and we have a wide selection of Donald Trump coins on our website. Just go to teapartypowerhour.com, click on the Trump coins tab at the top of the page, and you will see a wide selection of some very beautiful 99.9% silver coins. I'm very excited about our guest today. Her name is Stacy Manning. She is the co-author of Raising Conservative Kids in a Woke City. Her co-author was Katie Faust, and they've written books together before. In this particular book, they're teaching parents how to raise conservative kids in a woke city. She knows about what she speaks and what she writes because she and her husband of 20-something years are raising 3 kids behind enemy lines in a suburb just outside of Seattle. When she's not sticking her meddling fingers in another writer's work, she is barefoot in the kitchen making her husband a sandwich. Stacy Manning, welcome to the Tea Party Power Hour. It's an honor to have you here.
Hey, thank you so much. The pleasure is mine.
Well, looking at that last line, in the kitchen, you're barefoot in the kitchen, no less, making your husband a sandwich. Did you put that on there to just tick off feminist, or what was that about?
I'm thinking maybe I should have added pregnant and barefoot in the kitchen making a sandwich. You know, I put it there because it's funny. And everyone is so uptight and so looking for opportunities to be angry and upset and hair triggered that I don't mind needling folks a little bit. Everybody just needs to calm down and have a laugh.
I agree with you. In fact, you stole my next line. I was going to say, if you had put barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen making your husband a sandwich, that would kind of be the maraschino cherry on the let's tick off some feminist ice cream sundae. But you beat me to it, as always. I love it. That was good. And I left out the part about you inventing the middle finger. That was quite a surprise.
This is widely accepted and known. Not only did I invent the middle finger, aka bird of freedom, I was born in a volcano. Just ask my 11-year-old. And there's got to be one other thing. And the red-haired thing, it means that I'm descendant of the Nephilim as well. That's the reason.
Wow.
I've got just a pantheon of crazy things under my belt.
It sure sounds like it. Well, I can't wait to get into this book and talk about some of the things there. On a more serious note, you're just outside of Seattle. I mean, Seattle certainly is in the running for woke capital of the world. Can't be an easy place to try to raise conservative kids, and you even send your kids to public school, as you noted in the book. So how does a person in a left-wing stronghold like Seattle or just outside of Seattle raise conservative kids all while sending them to a public school?
They have to be equipped. And sometimes, Mark, the only conservative principles or pushback other kids in these public schools and these blue bastions are going to hear are from conservative kids. In the elementary school, it's a parent's job to really filter out and build the knowledge base of your child. They are classical educators out there will recognize the classical trivium that we follow because there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. During the grammar phase, you build their knowledge. They are the most susceptible to be filled with truth and beauty, as my co-author Katie so often repeats. But it's the truth. And that's why the educators in Florida flipped out about the so-called Don't Say Gay bill, the Parents' Right initiative Ron DeSantis signed in, because they know that during those years, the kids are the most susceptible for really building their worldview and filling those files that they will go back to and reference in the logic phase where middle school transpires. And during those years, you have to help them build their filter. They're going to be coming back to you with all sorts of crazy stuff that you could not, I'm not creative enough to manufacture some of the crazy stuff my children have come home with over the years. And that's when you need to work with your children by disseminating from the facts that they gathered during those grammar years, what is truth. There's D.L. Moody, pastor from the past. He often spoke of a crooked stick versus a straight stick. And you can't really tell how straight a stick is until you lay a crooked stick up against it. And these are the years in middle school where you're helping them kind of whittle that conservative straight stick with which they can line up against all of these terrible, awful, bad ideas and flat out lies that they will be confronted with. And then there's high school. By about high school, you're finished. It's the rhetoric phase, the phase where they can elucidate their own ideas and defend their principles because they've really become owners of them and they've seen the truth that the parents out there have been teaching them. In this phase in particular, high school, your most important job is to stay connected to your kids. The booger wiping and vomit cleaning years are behind you, but they still need you just more cerebrally in the high school years.
Well, yeah, those vomit and booger years are over. Unless you own cats, then the vomit years are never over. But one of the things that I think we have to say is that you can, in fact, get little feedback signals along the way that you are on target with your kids. For instance, your daughter has done a wonderful job of converting pro-choice kids to pro-life on her school bus. Tell us about that.
Yes, indeed. And the first time that she came home with a successful conversion story, she was beside herself, like still a little nervous about it, and breathlessly explained to me like how the whole thing went down on the bus. And she was elated. And it was really hard for her because, having these conversations can be difficult, but we need more courage. And she's such an example of courage in this way because she came home the second time and reported it was easier, Mom. And then the third time it was easier because by the sixth time she was like, Mom, none of these girls know why they think what they think. And like, I've kind of got this down. The conversation unfolds the same way every time. And it's gotten easier and easier. The first time is difficult for anyone, no matter what the age. But you will find that having some courage and speaking out and saying what you believe becomes easier over time. I'm sure that you can relate to this being a broadcaster.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have had liberals on the show before, and we've disagreed on a lot of different things. Although when I had Juan Williams on, he had just been fired from PBS for saying that if he saw a group of young black men who looked like they were in a gang approaching him at night on the street, he would get nervous. So I think that would have been true no matter what color the people were. And if they were a gang and they're approaching you late at night in the middle of the street, you're going to be concerned unless you're some kind of an idiot. But I guess because he singled out the African-American race, PBS decided to let him go. So he was a little sympathetic toward conservatives at that point, having just been canned at the hands of his fellow liberals. Your son is giving you some signals, too, that you've done a good job with him. Tell us about that.
I think that you're referring to my youngest. We were so proud of him. He went to school recently. He's in the 5th grade. And when he walked into the classroom and observed that there was a man in prosthetic breasts and a dress at the head of the classroom, he did a quick calculation and realized, oh, that's my substitute teacher, and my parents wouldn't want me at school today. And so he turned tail and found the principal and said, yeah, my parents won't want me in the classroom today. And the principal knowing my family, because we make it very clear who we are and what we believe and what our expectations are as the primary educators of our children, agreed. And so instead of being victimized, my son felt victorious. Then I went to the school board and defined the difference between gender dysphoria and autogynephilia, which I don't think many people quite understand. The gender dysphoric trouble is obviously the people don't feel aligned with the sex they were born. But autogynephilia is where a male gets off sexually by having others perceive him as female. This is a fetish that falls under the philia umbrella. And there's no way that a child could tell whether or dealing with a gender dysphoric person who by nature does have a mental disorder, or somebody who's getting off sexually in front of a captive audience of 28 11-year-olds all day. And so he took care of that business and had a day off.
Well, I'm very proud of your son. And I'll also add that I think most people would be shocked that this happened in a public school outside of Seattle, because most people would think in that environment, the principal would have called Child Protective Services and said this kid's parents have been brainwashing him. But instead, he knew the situation. And I think that relates back to something else in your book. You have to let the teachers know who you are, what your expectations are, so that they understand when something like this happens where your child is coming from. And you obviously did a good job of that, because the principal didn't even attempt to fight it. He could have easily said, Billy, get your tail back to the class. That's no reason to not want to be in a classroom. Or, like I said, jokingly, but could have happened, he could have called Child Protective Services and said, this kid's parents have brainwashed him into being some kind of a homophobe or a transphobe. And he didn't do those things because you had laid down the law to the school, probably on Meet the Teacher Day or before. That didn't happen. So there were a lot of things in play there. One, that you had done a good enough job raising your son that he knew you and your husband would not want him in there. But the other thing is the principal knew who he was messing with if he had not agreed to let your son out of that class. So it seems like everything just came together just right on that.
It's so beautiful. He's such a guerrilla marketer for what we're trying to impart in raising conservative kids in a woke city. I couldn't have manufactured a more exciting victory of like, yeah, this is working. And not only educating the teachers in a kind and gentle and friendly and using their language, team up and partner with and all the buzzwords, but being there, being present, making sure that the educators understand that they're there for the reading, writing, and arithmetic. And while being in the classroom and asking about the books in the library, and just, being a little bit squeaky is so very important. But also exposing your kids to things that you might believe are a little bit beyond their pay grade it's one of the biggest problems I think that we have. We want to shelter our children, and I totally relate to that. I'm a fairly decent parent. I want to protect my kids, but we have to remember that shelter is temporary, and they must be equipped to not only protect themselves when they're out from your care, but there's something called the Founder's Principle that we talk about in the book. And the Founder's Principle explains the phenomenon of the first person introducing your child to something will become an expert of that thing in your child's eyes. So say Bobby brings the smartphone out on the playground and shows your kid porn, and your kid wants to know a little more about porn, he's going to go back to the expert Bobby. That's why parents must broach these subjects earlier and in age-appropriate ways that won't damage them. But you have to warn them and be that expert so that they will come to you instead of Bobby on the playground when the world hands them something they're not ready for.
As a parent, my son's 32 now, but as a parent, I can tell you that you get that feedback and it makes you feel so good when something happens and you realize that this is proof that there's some good parenting going on here. A story I like to tell is we were in a parking lot of a mall. My son, who was 4 years old at the time, saw a dime on the ground. He goes, "Look, Dad, I found some money." And I sort of winked and said, "Well, son, what are you going to do with all that money?" And he said, "I know. Let's give it to a poor kid who doesn't have any money." And my heart just melted. And we went into the first store on the outskirts there, one of the anchor stores, and there was a big jar for Jerry's Kids back when Jerry Lewis was with the Labor Day Telethon. And I picked my son up, held him up high. He dropped his dime in there. He was so proud of himself. I was proud of him. And that is feedback that you're doing a good job. Same thing with you.
Indeed.
When your daughter came home and told the story of converting the pro-choice kid on the bus, you must have felt great. When your son told you the story of what happened at school, you must have felt great. There are rewards, emotional rewards for doing your job right as a parent, as opposed to being one of those people who wants to let the school raise the kids or the friends raise the kids. My son, if I can brag on him for a second, straight A's in high school, straight A's with his bachelor's, straight A's with his master's. And the teachers and professors always praised him. And people would ask me, how did you raise such a good kid? And my response was, because I raised him. He wasn't raised by his friends. He wasn't raised by the teachers. He was raised by my wife. He was raised by me. And that's why he turned out the way he did. And I can see the same thing with you. You said that you have to get to the kids first. You do. When your kid encounters something they don't understand or something that makes them feel uncomfortable, you want the first thought in their head to be, I need to go talk to mom. I need to go talk to dad, or I need to talk to mom and dad. You don't want them to say, well, I need to go talk to Todd, or I need to go talk to Dylan, or I need to go talk to whomever, or I need to go talk to Mr. So-and-so, my science teacher. No, it has to come back to the family. And I really think that is one of the huge differences between people who raise their own kids and people who let other people do it for them. Another story I like to tell people is that I knew this woman who had a PhD who worked for the same pharma company I did. And she was on the science side, I was in the sales side, but she left the company because she got this tremendous offer to work for a company that was paying her several times more than she'd been making with us. But she had to be in Japan a large part of the year. So I bumped into her a few years later in a doctor's office, no less, and I asked her how she was doing, and she said she was a little disappointed because her kid came home from school wearing a tongue ring. Her son did. And she said, we thought we did all the right things. I don't really know what I'm doing wrong. I can't believe this happened. My son with a tongue ring. And I just thought, you're in Japan half the year.
Right.
You're not, There's no way you can raise your kid from Japan. And her husband was a very successful professional as well. So, I mean, how does that happen?
Quality time just cannot be manufactured. It has to come from quantity time. I think Dr. Laura was famous for saying that. The investment that we need to make into our children is actually a selfish one. If we spend those first, 18 to 20 years, it's not a sacrifice. It's a joy to raise children, but they need to be the priority. And when we take the responsibility of being a parent, going all in on that will most often, almost always, save you from the age of 50 plus heartache because you haven't launched well-adjusted adults capable of leading successful lives. And I don't want to live knowing that if I just could have, I should have made that investment, or that there was a price on my living in my September to December years in sorrow because my kid needed me when I wasn't there.
A lot of people like to say, especially busy business executives like to say, that it's not quantity time, it's quality time, but it's really both. I mean, you can't, if you're not there for them, someone else is raising them. If you're not going to do the job, someone else is going to do it. And again, I think that's what's wrong with so many kids today and adults that were raised this way, is that the TV raised them, or their friends raised them, or the teachers raised them. But the parents did not raise them. They were too busy chasing dollars. And if you're a parent out there and you think that because you can buy your kid the latest iPhone, the most expensive clothes, and do things for them financially, that you're doing your job as a parent, if you're neglecting them in other areas, then you're not doing your job as a parent, no matter how much money you throw at the situation. It's kind of like government. Democrats, liberals always think you just throw some taxpayer money at the problem and it will go away. And that's not the case. You can't fix some things by throwing money at them. And that's exactly what we're seeing with the way a lot of these kids are being raised. I have a lot more questions that I want to ask you, and I even want to get into this autogonophilia thing versus gender dysphoria. I want to go back and revisit that. But first, we have to do a little business with America so we can keep the lights on. So if you'll bear with me, Stacy, we're going to take a break, do a little business with America, and we will be right back.
All right.
We all know a guy who only occasionally shaves for big occasions, and it's because that occasional shave really hurts. It's the time of year for big occasions, and yet there he is, suffering with that cheap drugstore razor. Let's help him out. Henson Shaving's line of razors, built with aerospace precision, deliver a smooth shave your dad, brother, and even son can enjoy, eventually. With replacement blades just 10 cents each, you'll buy it once, and they'll use it for life. How's that for the perfect gift? Celebrate with 100 free blades on your first purchase, and no subscription headaches. HensonShaving.com/holiday.
At Granger, we're for the ones who specialize in saving the day and for the ones who've mastered the art of keeping business moving. We offer industrial-grade supplies for every industry with same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders, all backed by real people ready to help. So you can get the right answers and products right when you need them. Call, click Granger.com, or just stop by. Granger, for the ones who get it done.
For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Granger, because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Granger.com, or just stop by. Granger, for the ones who get it done.
And we are back with Stacy Manning. She is the co-author of Raising Conservative Kids in a Woke City. Stacy, you mentioned something earlier about there is a difference between gender dysphoria. That's somebody who genuinely feels, these people do exist, that genuinely feel that they are in the wrong body, that they are a female trapped in a man's body or a man trapped in a female's body or whatever. And those people do need help because that is a psychiatric condition. But on the flip side, there's also something called, I believe you said autogonophilia. Did I pronounce that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay. And that is where a man, you said, I'll use your term, gets off to the idea that he is appearing as a woman before people. Now, you said in your son's case, you didn't know if he could tell, is it a true gender dysphoric person or is it a person with autogonophilia? I'll tell you what my test is. My test is, are they dressed up like a drag queen or are they genuinely trying to appear as a woman? Because what I've seen from people who are gender dysphoric is that they do make an effort to look like a woman, whether it's Amy Schneider, who's a Jeopardy champion, or Rachel Levine. There's this effort to look female. Now, for the people who get off to looking like a female, even though they're male, it's always an exaggerated version of a female. They're wearing a breast prosthetic that has breasts the size of watermelons, and they're exaggerating their fingernails and their makeup. And there isn't a Bourbon Street prostitute that wouldn't look at these people and say that they've overdone the makeup and overdone the fake boobs and everything else. I mean, they are exaggerating femininity. They are mocking feminism. When you look at these people, this isn't somebody trying to be a woman. This is someone dressing like a clown. And this is someone mocking the female gender. So I think that's a good test because people who are truly gender dysphoric don't try to call as much attention to themselves. Obviously, if you're getting off emotionally, sexually, whatever, to looking like a female, even though you're a male, you're going to enjoy that more as more and more people notice you. So you exaggerate things to draw attention. Is that a fair assessment?
Not being an expert and not being able to know what's in the hearts and minds of anyone else, I'd say that's a decent assessment and fairly enough explained. But for the under, 12 crowd,
oh sure,
it's just a no-go zone for those very reasons that one can never tell the motivations, regardless of what someone might say You just can't know. So there's no reason to know.
One case that happened, and I can't remember if it was in Canada or the Seattle area, was a teacher who was male and was showing up dressed just like I said, exaggerated prosthetic breasts, the whole 9 yards, and then was videotaped at their apartment complex walking around dressed like a male. So the only time they dressed up like a woman is when they were in front of kids. Now that to me seems like a clear-cut case of someone who's enjoying the fact that people are seeing them as a woman.
Me too.
And where was that? Was that in your area?
No, it was in Canada.
In Canada. Okay. I knew it was one of the two. So at any rate, those people are out there. And the bigger question in all of this is, how do they get past the job interview?
Yeah. Because the world's gone mad and adults aren't willing to simply say no, because it actually goes back. I think that the way that we're just such a hedonistic and materialistic society. We've totally lost our way. It is the next iPhone. It's the appearance. It's the, do whatever you want, whatever feels good, emptiness of consumer America. And you said something earlier with regards to putting the dollars before children. And I think it harkens back to the first book that Katie Faust and I wrote called Them Before Us, Why We Need a Global Children's Rights Movement. And it's about all the ways that we're sacrificing or children's rights rather on the altar of adult desires. And I think that many people and the way our society is looking at children these days, they look at children as accessories, as something that will satisfy some need that the adult has to be a parent, rather than really acknowledging the importance of putting the children before us, whether it's divorce, same-sex parenting, donor conception, surrogacy, adoption, ignoring the importance of biology, the redefinition of marriage. I mean, it's all about what the adults want. And then the kids just kind of get plugged in wherever is convenient. And we've unleashed a couple generations of kids that need safe spaces and coloring books in college.
Very true. And I think there are, in fact, too many parents trying to live out their lives a second time or live out their childhood a second time vicariously through their kids. We see that all the time. And it goes back to a lot of things. I know whenever we were pondering a name for my son, the one thing I made clear to my wife is that my son was not going to be Mark Jr. Now, if your son has got your husband's name, I apologize in advance, but the bottom line is that I see when that's done is that the child is an extension of the father. I know there are plenty of people who do that, plenty of conservative people who do that, but I just feel like the kid needs to be his own person or her own person, and that starts with the name.
If we're out here saying crazy things, I also think women should absolutely change their last name to their husband's name. If they're going to be associated with a male for the rest of their life, let it be the one that she chose to marry and have children with rather than her father.
Yeah, that's kind of a sticking point with me as well. And you see that a lot more these days. And I know some couples where that was done, and in one case the woman was like, well, I was thinking about going for my master's and PhD, and I wanted to go ahead and have all the work recorded under my maiden name. And I was thinking, you got married when you were working on your bachelor's. You hadn't published anything of note at that point. That's a BS excuse. And I think that's just an example of women who are making it clear that they are rejecting the patriarchy that is embedded in our society, if you will. But yeah, that's a real stickler with me as well. The words conservative and woke both appear on your book cover. So I think it's a fair question to ask you, how do you define conservative and how do you define woke? And I know woke is a loaded question because even wokies can't agree on what it means, but I'd like to know what you think it means.
Fair enough. We didn't say raise Republican kids or Trumpian kids. We chose conservative because we believe that there are a number of principles, our founding principles, that need to be conserved and taught to our children. Just some basic equality, not equity. Everyone should have the same opportunity without any barriers to any weighted thing, just a meritocracy, the importance of fairness, and that laws are applied equally. And it's just basic conservative stuff. What are the woke? Well, the woke so often riled up on campuses by, I don't know whether evil or ignorant professor types who decide on a utopia and then they point out an institution that must be destroyed or divide people among racial groups, pit them against one another, and foment as much discord as possible, breaking down the social norms and just making everyone an enemy of the other, just for the sake of discontent and social upheaval. They don't actually have a plan to make it any better. They want to destroy because, I don't know, maybe their mom didn't spend enough time barefoot in the kitchen making them a sandwich. I don't know.
Sandwich. I'm getting visions in my head of Leon off of the Andy Griffith Show, who was always offering people a bite of his peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Every time you say that, in the military, one of the things they do before they send in the ground troops is they will bomb the heck out of an area to soften it. And one of the things I think communists are doing in order to eventually turn America into a communist nation is they're softening us up right now. And they're doing that by dumbing down education, and they're doing it by attacking things like Christianity and attacking the family, the core family unit, the nuclear unit. And even Karl Marx himself made it clear that we have to destroy the core family unit in order to be successful. And that's what you see. Liberals seem to be big believers in ditching a marriage the minute things go a little bit south. They're big on letting the village raise the kids, not the kind of village you talked about in the book. We're going to get to that. But they want the state to raise the kids. They attack anything that's wholesome and good. Patriotism, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, you name it. If it's good, you'll notice Barack Obama never went to the annual Boy Scout Jamboree once. Why? Because that was raising patriotic kids from a family with a good core family unit, and Barack Obama wanted no part of that. Now, if there had been a jamboree with thousands of kids who came from broken homes and did drugs and cross-dressed, Obama would have been there with bells on, literally. But he didn't want any part of that because Democrats seem to shun, liberal Democrats seem to shun anything that's wholesome or good. And it's all about softening up the target. They want us to be a country where we don't know who our mother and father are. We don't know what gender we are. We don't know right from wrong. And I see all of that as sending in the planes to bomb the hell out of us before they actually try to advance the ground troops and turn this into a communist country. But that's just my 2 cents. I'm just a podcaster. Let me ask you, though, what do you see in terms of the systematic attack on the core family unit?
The smallest political unit is the family, and that is where we're going to make the most headway in this country. There's no top-down fix. We can't count on our politicians to come in and save the day. Nobody's going to white horse this thing. It's going to take a village made up of individual family units that are preparing their children. They are softening us up. It's hard to believe the past 5 years. It used to be that I could understand the reason that someone was doing something because there seemed to be some order behind it. But the chaos, I can't read the Matrix anymore because it doesn't make any sense other than the other side has just been blinded by pure evil. And it's hard to fathom, as you can say as a Christian, the fallen world and understand that as a concept. But the government response to COVID was, and then I get a call from being crazy.
You broke off
sorry.
there for just a second. What did you say just before crazy?
I got a phone call from Beijing, China, as I'm talking about COVID.
Right now?
Yeah, it just buzzed in. I'm like, Beijing, really? Okay, God has a hilarious sense.
Well, it wasn't Wunan.
No, not Wuhan.
Okay.
A little
But
bigger.
that would have been really freaky. And I want to
Oh
point
my.
out that that is a strange coincidence. I want to point out that Hillary Clinton is famous for saying it takes a village. She wrote a book with that title. But in her case, the village is the public school system. The village is the state. The village is a whole bunch of strangers that you don't even know raising your kids. When you say it takes a village, you're defining village completely differently, made up of entirely different people. Let's clarify that. When you say village, how do you define that?
Yeah, I mean your people, just like we cover in the book. When she was saying, when you picture a village, all of those people in a village know one another. They are coming from individual family units, helping to keep an eye on the kids when they're out running about. She's talking about institutions. It was just entirely not. It's not a village. She's talking about institutions, period. When we cover in one of our concepts in raising conservative kids in a woke city, to find your people is one of the most important things that you can do. Not only do your kids need you to be a strong, knowledgeable conservative, but they're going to need other adults in their life that are living out conservatism in real, tangible, and different ways than your parents are. And it's good to see many different people in many different walks of life and the ways that they're maybe trying to influence the culture or run for office. So as your kids grow up, there's not a one size fits all, and observing the way other families are raising their children and the outcomes for those children will help inform your kids. Yeah, my parents are, they were spot on that. Or, I think that other family maybe covered that better. Having other conservative people, like, for example, when my husband, bless his heart, he made the mistake of running for city council during the first year the first election that Trump ran for office. And we live in an insane place. It was so crazy. And the online hatred and vitriol was so great that Mr. Manning directed me to not use my last name in public for fear of these people harming us. My daughter was called a Nazi at school. The pact that formed, sending out all of this ridiculous, horrible campaign material against my husband. It was just insane. It's a 50,000 person little city right on the border of Seattle. And outside interests spent over $100,000 in order to get their lefty union selections in office. It was devastating. It was a very difficult experience for my family. And there was no justice, no happy ending. But I have a village of people that were always at the ready to tell us, we're right. We've got your back. We know all this is garbage. We're praying for you. Hey, can I bring you some dinner? Hey, let's have a laugh about this, because it's hard to be in such a place and to have the hate coming from so many places, and strangers online. It's easy to feel like everyone is against you. So if you haven't established your tribe of people, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you.
The other side really does go for the jugular. I was involved with Sheriff Arpaio's investigation of Barack Obama's documents, which included his Social Security card, his draft registration card, and his birth certificate. And I was kind of the unofficial voice of that investigation. I did all the videos for the 3 press conferences that Sheriff Arpaio held in Arizona. And I received some of the craziest emails. People would say, the cold case posse is raising money on this stuff. It's all fraud. Therefore, you're engaging in financial fraud. You're going to go to prison. Your cellmate's going to be an axe killer who keeps telling you you'd look good in a sundress. The cellmate's going to rape you over and over again. And I really question the psychology of someone who would feel the need to do that. If you disagreed with what we said, and we had forensic experts in different parts of the world all agreeing that that document, especially the birth certificate, had been altered, why not just say, well, I disagree with what the experts said, and why? Why are you telling someone they're going to be in prison, they're going to be raped, It seems like everything always goes back to sex with these people, too. I don't know what it is, but it's how they identify themselves. It's like, well, tell me about yourself. Well, I'm a homosexual. Okay.
Right.
That's the first thing that comes out of their mouth when they're liberal. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why are they so vicious? Why are they so filled with hate? There were people who sent me regular emails trying to mess with me psychologically because I was involved in that, because I was lending my voice to it. And, what you're saying about your husband running for student council is the same thing. Let me give you an example. There was one group of forensic experts, and these are people who trained police departments all over Europe. This particular group was in Italy, and it was a group of PhDs who were experts on computer forensics. And we also had people that were experts on old-fashioned document forensics, document examiners, but these guys were computer forensic experts, and they all also worked for a university. Well, when they put out a report siding with us that the odds of that birth certificate not being altered were very slim, the OBOTs in the United States found out the name of the company, found out where each of them worked, and went to the university there in Italy where they all taught and tried to get them to lose their jobs as professors because they had issued an honest report about what they believed about that particular document. They're not satisfied to say, well, your expert says this, well, my expert says that. No, they want to put this person out of work. They want to make this person not be able to feed themselves. They're vicious. They're crazy. They're obsessed. And I guess
I think they're a cult. Human beings are made to worship. And Barack Obama is the high priest of the leftist cult. And such a cult based in no higher deity is bound to look for sacrifices. And they're not going to make the sacrifices themselves. They're going to take out other people because it satisfies whatever it is inside of them that has made them worship this leftist socialist utopia. And anybody, they've got their high holy days. They got a whole month they celebrate Pride. They have a whole lexicon, a forever changing lexicon to identify themselves to one another. They've got their flags, they've got their symbols, and you get excommunicated if you don't march lockstep, like Barry Weiss and Dave Rubin. You get a little bit too far outside and you are excommunicated. It is a religion.
it is. I had a minister on a couple of weeks ago, and that's one of the things we discussed is that when you don't have Christ in your heart, you look for something to fill that void because, as you said, humans are engineered to worship. It's in our DNA. And when you don't have God, you put something else in there, whether it's global warming or Barack Obama. I still will remember to the day I die that YouTube video where a group of school children were instructed by the teacher to put in Barack Obama's name into the song Jesus Loves the Little Children. And it was Obama loves the little children. I was just like, did they do that? Did they just do that? And they did. They did. It was basically Obama's Jesus now. So there is something wrong with them. I have seen college students screaming at a camera that if you didn't agree there were 600 genders, you were denying science. And others will say if you don't believe in global warming, or at least anthropogenic global warming causing the earth to boil over, that you are denying science. And I don't know about you, Stacy, but I'm not going to let a bunch of people who think an unborn baby a few days before birth is just a worthless clump of cells teach me about science. I don't think they know the first thing about science, and I'm not going to let people who think that all a man has to do is cut off his private part and suddenly he's a woman lecture me about science. I don't think these people know anything about science, but in their minds, and I had a guy say this last week, they're both arrogant and ignorant. I've always told liberals on Twitter, you're a very special blend of ignorance and arrogance. Not only are they wrong about everything, but they're so arrogant they don't think there's any chance they could be wrong. So that's what we're up against. And in order to go up against something that formidable, you need help. And one of the things people can do is read your book, Raising Conservative Kids in a Woke City. Another thing they can do is get involved with Them Before Us. That was the title of your first book, but it's also a website, thembeforeus, I believe, .com. Tell us about Them Before Us. tell us what you can do in addition to encouraging people to read this book and your previous book, what parents can do to get involved with Them Before Us and what Them Before Us can do to help the parents.
Well, Them Before Us is a nonprofit that my dear friend Katie Faust launched. Oh gosh, how many years ago? I'm unsure of the years. We've been writing together about the needs and rights of children for about 8 years now, and we started our collaboration defending traditional marriage. And as we were kind of duking it out on from our little corner of the internet, we quickly began to realize that we're talking about a much greater issue here. So no matter whether, I think I went through them before, no matter whether we're talking about surrogacy or donor conception or same-sex parenting, divorce, marriage, we're trying to change the global conversation from focusing on the adult desire in a marital relationship, instead focusing on a child's right to be known and loved and raised by their biological mother and father. There's so many horrible things that have happened, even just here in Washington State. A few years ago, I testified to Congress. They were in a committee meeting talking about the passage of this bill called the Uniform Parentage Act. And it was all structured on, the importance of gays having children, and they brought one kid after another up with gay parents talking about how important it was and how getting their parents' marriage recognized was just like the best thing that ever happened to them. It's like Stockholm Syndrome style, right? Behind this so-called gay marriage or lesbian and gays parenting bill lurked a horrible child trafficking truth. Because of this bill, a woman can be brought here to this state, see a doctor one time, be impregnated with gametes, sperm and egg from two people that she does not know, and be taken away to God knows where, carrying a baby she's not biologically related to. Ivan, the human trafficker, can bring 15 sex-trafficked women here, have them all impregnated with children they have no attachment to. And imagine, what could happen to these poor children? We cannot be making policy on gays just want to have families, and these could be the awful results. People can't even stop littering. So,
let's talk about what happens to these children. Obviously, Ivan isn't bringing these women here to get them impregnated because he just wants to see the world's population go up. He's bringing them here to become impregnated because he wants those children once they're born. So the big question is, what happens to them? Are they being sold on the black market to parents who want children, which is one option, or is something even worse happening to them? Are they going into a life of sexual slavery? What happens to these kids as they're growing up?
We have an example of one evil couple that purchased a baby through surrogacy and were molesting it and molesting this little boy and using him as payment for other disgusting molesters and pedophiles as they just moved fabulously around the world, trafficking their baby as a sex toy for these perverts. It's just heartbreaking. And,
this is one of those subjects that people don't like to talk about because it's so uncomfortable, but we have to talk about it. This is real.
Yes.
This is happening. And it's interesting to me that I've been online arguing with trans people about whether drag queens belong in a kindergarten classroom. And I said this last week on the show. Some people have asked me, well, Mark, these people are just so kind, these drag queens. They're donating their extra time to teach these kids how to read. Mark, don't you want these kids to learn how to read? And I wasn't having any of it. I said, first of all, there are teachers in the classroom being paid to teach the children how to read. And I haven't read anywhere where there's a lacking in the teachers in public schools and they can't teach kids how to read unless they have drag queen assistance. And the other thing I like to say, and I know some people are going to be tired of hearing me say this, is if they want to help people and read to people, they could go to nursing homes. But they know that their luck of recruiting somebody and grooming somebody who's in the last couple of years of their life isn't going to be very successful. And even if it were, you're only creating a trans person for a couple of years. It's much more efficient to go after the kids. So don't tell me that you're trying to provide a community service and that you're trying to teach kids how to read, you're recruiting kids. And I actually had a person come on my show. This trans thing has gotten so bad that other members of the LGBT community are having a problem with it. And I actually brought a guy on the show. He was gay, he was African American, and he's sick and tired of people saying that white people are racist. And he's also tired of what trans are doing in the kindergarten classroom. And he said that lesbian, gay, and bi people are finding this horribly offensive. So these people don't even have a home in the LGBT community anymore because what they're doing to children is so disgusting.
Well, and it's the most anti-gay movement ever that we would say that we wouldn't just say wait and see. You know, what is it? The figure is like 90% of children who are just treated with a wait and see come out on the other side of puberty comfortable with the sex that they were born. But if you introduce like chemicals and surgical interventions, I think that the statistic is entirely reversed. So you're a tomboy. I mean, that's still a thing. It doesn't mean you have the wrong genitals. It's such an attack on reality. I think that's part of the reason that The Matrix is so hard to read, because it's just baffling that the truth is so very obvious to me, but people who are bent on destroying just reject basic truth.
Let's go back to Them Before Us for just a second. We talked about buying the books, and do you have educational materials available through Them Before Us that can help parents raise conservative kids in a very liberal environment?
Plenty. Not only do we have many, many stories of children who have been raised in not traditional, but modern families, which is just, that's a guaranteed term that you're talking about kids that are sacrificing for adults. But not only do we have those stories, but our book, Them Before Us, Why We Need a Global Children's Rights Movement, covers each of these topics in a child-centric way and gives people changes the perspective of how we're looking at children's rights. We're not anti anything. We are pro child and the best environment for children to be raised to become thriving adults. And we've actually been translated into 4 languages. It's been printed in Korean, Hungarian, Lithuanian, and Albanian. We've had impact on, I believe it was the Albanians rejected same-sex marriage, and we had a big say in why they did that, because they had ears to hear. If you have like surrogacy kind of bugs me, or IVF, I'm crunchy about it, but you just you can't quite put your finger on it. I think there's like 200 reviews on Amazon, one after another, person saying this is exactly the manual I needed to be able to talk about these difficult subjects with my girlfriends, with my family, because they're a little tough, but we arm you. It's a manual, really, for all things children's rights. And also great information to have when you're raising conservative kids, no matter whether you're in a woke city or not. Raising conservative kids in a woke city is a very, very fun read. Them Before Us is a heavy read with a little bit of humor in it, because the subject matter is very trying. So we try and have a little levity. But in Raising Conservative Kids, I was let off the leash. My humor is a little dark. My language might be a little coarse at times. And if we can get that book into the hands of as many young parents as possible, that would be a dream come true.
Well, tell them how they can get a copy.
Amazon.com, Raising Conservative Kids in a Woke City, Teaching Historical, Biological, and Economic Truths in a World of Lies. I also read the audiobook as well, which is also available on Amazon. So if you like the cut of my jib, you can listen to 5 hours.
I don't want to freak you out, but while we've been on the phone, I received a text message in Chinese.
No.
I did. I'll send you a copy of it. It came in probably about a couple of minutes after you said you'd gotten a phone call from China. So
Wild.
I guess the Chinese people are hitting American podcasts right now that are conservative. I don't know what's going on. I can't read this because it's in Chinese. But I'm looking at this going, okay, she received a phone call from China and I received a text message from China. And while she was talking about COVID. So that is really interesting. I have been known to embrace a conspiracy theory or two, including the birth certificate, but I don't think I could write a conspiracy theory to fit around you and I both receiving messages from China. within a couple of minutes of each other while you were talking about COVID. Is there anything, Stacy, anything at all that you were hoping I would ask you about, and right now you're going, darn it, I wish Mark would have asked me about this?
Gosh, you are a professional. I really feel like I'll hang up the phone and think of something.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I'm so pleased. You're such a pleasure to speak with, and really a master conversationalist. So I appreciate how in depth we've gone, and hopefully we can sell some books and
I hope so.
change some hearts and minds.
Christmas is coming up, and let's say you're a grandparent. You've already raised your kids. Give it to your children so they can use the book to help raise conservative kids. Give it to a neighbor. Give it to a friend. It's really important that we all stand up collectively and say no to this nonsense that is occurring in our society. If you go back 50 years, neither Democrats or Republicans would have believed that one day in the United States we'd be debating whether drag queens belong in kindergarten classrooms, whether teachers can help children in school change genders without telling the parents. They would say, you're crazy. No one's ever going to debate that. That's common sense. Everyone knows that's wrong. But here we are in the year 2023 debating these types of topics. And ironically, it's the people who want to protect children who are being vilified by the media, not the people who want to put books in the schools that teach young boys how to perform sexual acts on grown men, not people who want to put an exaggerated drag queen with huge breast prosthetics into a kindergarten classroom. Oh no, it's those of us who want to protect the children who are being vilified by the mainstream media. And I don't think, going back to when I was a kid, I'm 60, so when I was 10 years old, I think if you'd have told any Republican, any Democrat this, they would have said, you're crazy. You have a crazy vision of the future. There's no way that's ever going to happen. I mean, we disagree on some things, but nothing like that's ever going to be debated. And yet, again, here we are in 2023. So, Stacy, I want to thank you for coming on the show. You're welcome to come on whenever you want. You've been a pleasure to interview. I know you've got one of the most soundproof, high-tech home recording studios in America, and that certainly was evident today. And not only that, you're extremely easy to work with. Love to have you back sometime. Tell Katie to come with you, and we could have some fun interviewing her as well. Let's give Yoram Hazani a plug as well. He wrote the foreword to the book. And let's also, this was a Post Hill Press book, correct?
Yes, Post Hill Press.
Right. Let's give them some credit too, because without publishing outfits like Post Hill Press, your wonderful publicist, Olivia, we would not be able to get these books to market. I could just see, I'm not going to mention the names, but there are some publishing houses in America that if you brought this book to them, they'd have laughed in your face. We're not publishing that. No. Take your conspiratorial right-wing nonsense and get out of our office. But no, Post Hill didn't do that to you. And they put out I've had a lot of Post Hill authors on my show, and you guys are spreading messages through Post Hill that need to be spread. So once again, thanks for coming on the show. Enjoyed it very much. If you have anything else you want to talk about, come back from time to time just to tell us what's going on at Them Before Us, and maybe we can get into some of the individual materials in more detail that you have at Them Before Us. I mean, it doesn't have to be an hour-long interview. You guys come up with a new pamphlet or something. Come on the show.
Love it.
Tell us about it. So anyway, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
You are very welcome. And with that, we are done. But I want to thank everybody for stopping by the Tea Party Power Hour today. I want to remind you again to subscribe to our newsletter. Text T, T-E-A, as in taxed enough already, to 44144. That's actually my old, 44 is my old football number when I played in 8th grade. Think 8th grade football doesn't mean anything to a kid? You're wrong. It still means something to me. And also want to remind you that we have this amazing collection of Donald Trump coins, capturing everything from when he and Melania came down the escalator to other things that happened, great achievements that happened during his presidency. So come to teapartypowerhour.com, click on the Trump Coins tab. Once again, that's the Trump Coins tab, and you'll see a wide selection. And all you have to do is click on one of the coins and you'll be shown how to order them. They make great stocking stuffers for all the MAGA people on your Christmas list. So once again, thanks for being here. Look forward to having you back very, very soon.
You've been listening to the Tea Party Power Hour with Mark Gillar.
We all know a guy who only occasionally shaves for big occasions, and it's because that occasional shave really hurts. It's the time of year for big occasions, and yet there he is, suffering with that cheap drugstore razor. Let's help him out. Henson Shaving's line of razors, built with aerospace precision, deliver a smooth shave your dad, brother, and even son can enjoy, eventually. With replacement blades just 10 cents each, you'll buy it once and they'll use it for life. How's that for the perfect gift? Celebrate with 100 free blades on your first purchase, and no subscription headaches. HensonShaving.com/holiday.
Monetizing digital services since 2004. Boosting the entertainment industry by making digital content accessible for everyone. AWG, where innovation meets monetization.